I talk about that this says the rise of TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. The content creators on these platforms are changing how people get the news, how people make decisions about what products to purchase, how people are entertained. And there's just big things happening. Within the last year, we saw YouTube become the dominant streaming platform on connected televisions. I don't think most people would have guessed that, right? Yeah. That more people are watching YouTube on television than are watching Netflix or Apple Plus or HBO Max. Max now, sorry. So I think that right there reflects how much people are seeing creators as a way to watching creator content as a way to unwind at the end of the day. So yeah, there's just this is going to require lots of vigilance, and I'm just excited to be kind of playing a small part in starting to standardize some of the education around this topic. Because I just think I think there's just so much creativity and energy around it. So that's what really draws me to it.
Welcome to On Top of PR with Jason Mudd.
Hello and welcome to On Top of PR. I'm your host, Jason Mudd with Axia Public Relations. And today we're joined by Bill Zimmerman. Bill, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I'm a regular listener, so it's really excited to be on the other side and get interviewed here.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. Thanks for your support.
Yeah.
So let me introduce you, Bill. Bill Zimmerman is assistant teaching professor in the College of Communications at Penn State. Before teaching, he worked as a newspaper reporter and public relations professional. He has a bachelor's degree from Indiana University of Pennsylvania and a master's in higher education from Penn State. He also holds accreditation in public relations. So, Bill, we have those two things in common, starting out in journalism as a newspaper reporter and earning accreditation in public relations. Today, we're talking about understanding the creator economy, and I understand you've literally written the book on it.
Yeah, I published a textbook last year through Kendall Hunt Publishing. New edition is coming out this fall. And yeah, it's been, a recognition of interest in this topic for students, and also a need to educate the next generation of future PR, marketing, and advertising professionals. So I've been, planning a textbook, working on some courses. We're actually going to launch a content creator certificate program within the next year here. So I'm working on that. Mm-hmm. So we want to address an increased interest among students in being creators, being content creators, and also understand that what we teach students about PR and advertising is going to have to adapt to what's happening out there. And that includes a lot more about creator and influencer strategies.
Got it. Okay. So, Bill, let's pretend that you just got invited to attend a meeting with a brand who's thinking about getting a influencer content creator involved. You come into the room, you've got their undivided attention. The first thing I think you'll probably do is help them understand the difference between an influencer and content creator. Let's do that first, and then see where we go from there.
Yeah, sure. Gladly. Because I'm always I sometimes go back and forth between the two or use them indistinguishably, but it is worth noting a difference. And a good way to kind of think about it is an influencer, making money almost solely through brand deals, being paid by a brand to promote a product in their feed with video, maybe to have it, and sometimes it's in the background, more like product placement. Other times they're talking specifically about the product. And often we can think of them at activating top of funnel activities, right? Because they have such trust with their audience and often, a level of fame, the idea is that they could be crucial to gaining some awareness for the first time for a brand. Content creators are making content that's maybe a little bit more niche, catering to different interests and hobbies. It is what are you are doing with this podcast, right? You are creating content with the idea that this can, burnish your brand as a PR professional and probably get you business leads, right? So a content creator may have other ideas for monetization. They may be trying to sell subscriptions to a course that they offer. They may be offering premium content at a monthly fee, or they may be selling merch or putting on live events. And often they could be used for more middle, late funnel type of activities, driving consideration, keeping people engaged once they find a product, once they convert. So those would be the two ways that I would separate those terms that we are hearing so much about right now.
Sure. Good. That's good background for the audience to be aware of. And so we're still in this same meeting, and they brought you in to be the expert on this topic. What are some guidelines or ground rules you would establish for them? What are maybe some of the things that, perceptions that need to be changed or addressed in the room before they go through the process?
Yeah, for sure. I would say the really big one is in the early days of this, it was a person's social media following is often driving brands' interest in them, right? Brands were just looking at numbers, just sheer mass of subscribers, followers, and that was the most important thing, right? Because you would think if this person has 1 million followers and we pay them to promote our brand, then we just got to sit back and let the money pour in, right? Yeah. And that is getting to become more thoughtful, more strategic, and we're also understanding that people with big social media followings may not have engaged, passionate social media followings. So lots of data is being collected right now to show that niche creators are often having a better connection with their audiences. Their content gets better engagement rates. I would encourage a brand to not have their judgment clouded by somebody having 1 million followers or 500,000, and know that you could do some pretty impressive things working with content creators who have 10,000, 20,000 followers, but who also have built great trust with their audience and have influence over them. So that would be the big place to start.
Yeah, Bill, actually, I like that a lot. And, over the years when we've done work with influencers or content creators on behalf of clients, we often find ourselves, and maybe you relate to this, but having to kind of reset their expectations in that, we've worked with a client who only does business in the United States, only sells products in the United States. And so we went and found influencers for them. And they're like, well, gosh, 40% of their audience is outside the United States. Do we get a 40% discount or something like that? And it's like, well, no, and they're like, well, we only can sell our product in the United States. Like, why would we want to hire this influencer that's going to be outside the United States? I'm like, do you realize the internet is global, right? And American culture is often, desired to be followed and trends identified through American culture. And so, but they really were upset about this. And so I just, to me, it was an obvious, kind of scenario of that, the internet is global. Our program On Top of PR, we focus on, helping American companies stay on top of PR, but, we've got audience all over the United States as well. All over the globe. And so, Bill, what would be your reaction to, that line of thinking?
Yeah, sure. I think, brands are going to want more information, right? And, and there is software to help with that, whereas, we would have maybe just been stuck with seeing the outward facing metrics like someone's following. You could, go look at their most recent posts and start to calculate an engagement rate or something along those lines. And now there is software that will do those things where you can see truly out of the percentage of followers, how many actually respond to a piece of content. You can also start to see, demographic information. So I like that brands can start to get a more nuanced look at the creators they're working with, for sure. But yeah, as you said there, that scenario doesn't necessarily discount that strategy, right? That you're not going to reach the right people in the United States. That influence may spread, beyond the globe. Something I've heard at a recent industry conference was that brands are there's usually two rules or two kind of goals with working with creators and influencers. It could be to drive sales, to drive growth, and it could be really about driving the brand, building a vibe around a particular brand, or enforcing this idea that this brand is edgy and of the moment. So I think there's hopefully this textbook, the courses, there's so many conferences now, organizations like the PRSA are producing case studies that are, reviewing creator strategies. Awards like the Webbies and Shorty Awards are excellent resources to look back on campaigns and see how they perform. So I anticipate, just brands and agencies increasingly getting smarter about how a campaign or a creator strategy should look.
Yeah, I think what you're also talking about is not only building the brand, but ultimately the brand's awareness, obviously. But then, and what I really emphasize is building the brand's reputation, right? To make a brand, in order to be known, in order to be liked, you have to be known. In order to be liked, you have to be, trusted. In order to be, and then once you're trusted, then people might consider buying from you. But I don't know anybody who's ever bought something from somebody they don't trust, or in the process of buying something from somebody they don't trust, isn't a little bit reluctant or weary or anxious about, is this really going to happen?
For sure. Yeah.
So I think it comes down to building, your brand awareness, and then ultimately building your reputation. And by reputation, I mean just being liked and trusted.
And rightly or wrongly, I think we're as what we're seeing with how public trust in our institutions, content creators have more are getting more trust than the media, than our government, than the institutions that have been so much in place, throughout time. So. And creators, that's not always an illusion. These creators have built up that trust by giving straight talk to their audiences, by giving honest reviews, even times where maybe they were paid to endorse something and they said they didn't like it, or the flavor was a little weird, or something along those lines. So, and also their willingness to share aspects of their lives. This is a space where a lot of public trust is being established.
Yeah, 100%. So earlier you mentioned software and tools that are helpful. Do you have any top of mind that you would recommend, or that, again, we're in a boardroom scenario, what kind of tools would you throw out that these organization might want to explore?
Sure. That's something that I'm in the process of doing, is approaching a lot of these software companies and saying, hey, you're willing to allow free access for educational purposes in Penn State classrooms. So that's some of the things I'm looking in. I know of some that I've not been able to work with any directly, but I know Grin is one that's an industry leader. Filio. So there's some of these ones out there, but I'm still trying to wrap my mind around what's there and figure out ways to that I could potentially access them to teach in our classes, because I think they're going to become more and more a part of the process. These tools will give you metrics. They will help you vet a creator, help you initiate a background check. Influential is another software with like an agency guidance component to it as well. But this process is going to get more thorough and more strategic, and the software will be playing a big role in that.
Yeah, I know. I haven't been super involved in the influencer programs that we've done on behalf of clients, but I know you're always kind of dependent upon the influencer to get a lot of that detail and that data, so you can kind of understand their reach and their audience and that kind of thing. But you're right. Not everybody's going to be able to get Mr. Beast to be their spokesperson, or mention them in content and things like that. But Bill, jumping into kind of that experience, this boardroom that we're having a meeting in, and we're talking to, kind of what's been your experience? What are your recommendations? Because I know what mine are, about when you're working with a content creator, about, how much direction you give them, how much control should you expect to have? Talk to me kind of about what your recommendations are there.
Yeah, I think that's a big dilemma right now, right? And something that could give a PR person chills. I think think about in really, when podcasts really started to take off, how brands started to entrust a podcaster with doing a host-read ad, and that's happened in radio, and that sort of thing has been around. But I thought that was really telling when I started noticing more of those, that a brand was willing to give up some of the control. Now, obviously, they gave that person some notes and a few talking points and things a call to action that they needed to hit, but they must have been seeing returns, right? And having that host tailor that message to their audience. And yes, that's the dilemma and the challenge right now. And how do you give enough guidance? And I think of it as doing those responsible things for the brand, right? And explaining the do's and don'ts, and outlining the talking points and the call to action that needs to take place, and the hashtags and the disclosure that needs to take place, but maybe staying away from too many creative notes if you're working with a creator that's maybe doing a comedy skit or something along those lines. So I think that's the understanding. Yes, you want to give them some guidance, and often they're probably receptive for some guidance as well, because they don't always, it's not second nature to them to understand exactly what the brand is trying to get out of this. So giving them some advice, but not overly prescribing exactly how this should unfold and what they should say. So I think that's this conference I attended recently was talking about that sort of thing, by giving some guidance, but not being overly directive in what exactly their deliverables are going to be.
Yeah, I think it's first of all, you said something interesting, right? Creator versus giving, creative notes. And you're wanting to engage this creator because of their creativity, because of their voice, because of their position, and their clout or influence over an audience. And the more you start directing it, the more you start giving them input and notes and direction and creativity, the less authentic it becomes of it actually being them, right?
Yeah, and the less effective it's probably going to be in getting that audience's attention and getting them to stick with that content.
Yeah.
And a creator doesn't want to turn off their audience either. They have their own, they have to try to make sure that this branded content weaves into their feed as naturally as possible, right? And they're always trying to figure out what's the right cadence for fully organic original content and branded content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's 100% right. I agree with that. And so I'm just making a note here, the importance of providing like a creative brief, like here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here's some key messages to keep in mind. And then really letting that person have the artistic freedom to be genuine to themselves, genuine to their audience, and stay authentic in that moment. I know we've done some work with ambassadors over the years, Bill, where a client, like a major family entertainment center that you would know of, that's, kind of an entertainment with arcades and food. And I don't want to say their name, without their permission on the show, but, we've hired brand ambassadors for a grand opening for them and stuff like that. And, they've given us a long list of everything that these brand ambassadors are supposed to know. And it's like, or, hiring, people to work at a trade show for you or help draw traffic to a trade show. The generation before mine, I think, called them, booth babes a lot of the time. And that's certainly not a, in vogue term to use. And at the end of the day, these people will, especially like in Vegas, if you go to Vegas for a trade show, there are people who are trained to be kind of ambassadors and trained to go out and bring people to a booth and have them sign up for something or do a demonstration. If you try to over-equip them with messages, they can't possibly know this much information about your company, right? So you have to keep it very high level. I often say 2 or 3 messages you want that person to know, because the next morning, if they're not employed by your booth again, they're going to a different booth, a different conference, a different trade show, and they've got to learn to be scripted all over again. And so, they're professionals at doing this, and their profession is, very short interactions, high conversion rate, bring somebody to the booth and go right back out and do it again. They're not even going to remember your company name in 5 days, So Bill, kind of, what are your notes? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the creator brief is one of the big takeaways I want students to get from my textbook. And I've been talking to creators, trying to figure out what should those elements be. And I think if you would examine 100 brands, you would see probably all sorts of approaches, from a very established, drawn out plan. And if it's in an industry like pharmaceuticals, it's going to be really long about what can and can't be said in that material. And you may find brands that aren't giving any briefing, whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So I, really thinking about that, there's, I see it as a critical part of the relationship, and that's also going to count for a lot of things like, after the fact that could be good for the brand, right? That could be guidelines about, it could be morality clauses, right? That if a creator does something like this, you can, instantly end a relationship and have the right to have that content removed. Or it could just be, follow-ups, asking a creator 60 days from now, take screenshots of all your metrics and send them back to us so we can assess how the performance of your content. So yeah, I think the brief is going to be one of these things that is going to become critical to how these campaigns run, and the creators get some guidance. The brand can cover their bases, and you can start to create some sort of shared understanding about what's expected, how many posts are going to be made, and and this is also a time to outline clear directions on ad disclosure, something I try to talk about a lot in class. Not every creator is doing it. And, to be in compliance with the Federal Trade Commission, laws, #ad or just ad should be right there. It should be the first thing in your caption. And I think that's the thing, that where the direction, it's going to be the brand's responsibility and the creator's responsibility to make sure that's done out of respect for the consumer.
Yeah, and just a quick soapbox moment here, Bill, is that the same should be done, believe it or not, for our audience when they're sharing content from their employer or somebody they're receiving financial benefit from. You might not have to lead with, ads, but you definitely need to say early in your post, hey, I work for this company. Now, you don't have to be as boring as saying, I work for this company. You could say, I'm proud to work for this company, or I'm so excited that my employer made the following announcement, or something like that. But you have to tie it in. Just like I have to say, I'm really, proud of my client, or happy that I was part of this campaign for my client, or, we love doing business with fill in the name of the company. Just some way to associate yourself with being part of the company. And, the one way I see this being done is like, I know other business owners, and I see like in community Facebook groups where they're saying, I'm looking for a construction company that can come and do this. And my friend's wife goes in there and says, oh, this company is the best. And she's tagging her husband's company without disclosing that, my husband works there, my husband owns, or something like that. And like you just said, now I don't think the Federal Trade Commission is going to come find this wife and fine her, but the company should be going, educating their employees to educate their family members. And for me personally, I can't tell you, Bill, how many times I've had, a family member of mine go in and leave a positive review for Axia. And I'm like, hey, I love your support. Thank you for supporting my small business. Could you take that down? Because you've never done business with us. Sometimes we share the same last name. It's not a good look. But bottom line is we want our reviews to be 100% authentic, and very similar when you're doing work with content creators. Yeah,
I've been impressed with what the Federal Trade Commission has created in recent years. They have a guide it's very plain language. It's not government speak about guidelines for these things. And they have started to touch on, employees, people who own businesses, people who have family relationships and businesses. And this is a subset of this influencer marketing world is trying to mobilize employees as well. B2B influencers, and there's, lots of push to have your employees talking about your brand on social media. And those people need to be disclosing as well that I work at this place. If you're sharing that post on LinkedIn about how your workplace was named one of the best places to work in America, clearly marking that you own that business or you work at that business. I'm worried, that that social media users maybe don't care as much around these things as they should, and that maybe brands and creators are going to keep looking for ways to kind of work around some of this because they don't want to harm the effectiveness of their posts in that moment.
Yeah.
And I think the thing we're seeing now is more branded content that is very subtle. It's a get ready with me where a creator has that soda brand just sitting on their vanity, and they're not even mentioning, it, or they take a quick sip in between, during a scene transition. And, I think there needs to be more vigilance on everybody's part. Otherwise, the mistrust will creep into the whole operation and hurt things in the long run.
That's a good point. You're exactly right. It is about trust, right? And the minute we forget that, or think that other people don't recognize it, is when kind of the spidey sense starts to go up in people's, the hair on the back of their head, or some kind of indicator where this just doesn't quite seem right to me. And, I was having a conversation this morning. I was on a video conference and the guy was saying, "Hey, I highly recommend this company. And, here's a link that you can click on to get, preferred treatment with this company," or something. And then he proceeded to say, "I don't have anything to do with this. I don't make any money off of this." And the more he kept saying that, the more I kept saying something's weird, And so I asked a mutual acquaintance of like, how does he have a referral code and there's no relationship there or whatever? And then the next time I got back on this same, video thing, the guy's like, "Hey, I guess I am making something off of this. I didn't realize at the time. And I will, anything I make from it, I'll just donate to a charity." And, he claims his handler set it up and he wasn't aware. But at the same time, I was kind of like, that seems kind of weird too. So I think at the end of the day, right, I distance myself from feeling comfortable buying from this organization because of, the fact that they weren't transparent and truthful. And so I think that's really good advice that you're giving. Go ahead, Bill.
No, I was just saying thank you for that. Yeah, I agree. And that's, referral codes, if you were to share a referral code, or you're going to, put it in your show notes and say, "Hey, I could potentially receive a portion of any sales driven by clicking on that link." And I think sometimes we lose sight of how, we would want to be treated if we were on the other end, right? We would want all that information to determine how valid we find that recommendation, right? And it doesn't mean that we'll discount it after we know that person has been paid or compensated in some way. We may still trust them, so value their opinion so much that we still go forward. But it's just err on the side of oversharing, right? Any sort of arrangement that may benefit you in any way. And also disclosing that you received something for free. That's a whole other side of this. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be paid to be under that obligation to disclose that there is some material connection there.
Yeah. What I see a lot of, Bill, is the local TV personality, either former personality or current personality, "Oh, look, I just happened to be at, Bob's Fitness today and I'm getting a personal training session with Bob, the owner. And I just wanted to go live and say hi to you guys." And it's like, is that really what's happening?
Sure.
And like, as the viewer, like you can see right through it. And it to me, I'm just like, are they not being trained either by the station or the network or someone else to know, hey, you've got to do these things. It's just an ethical and moral right thing to do is to disclose.
Yeah. There's probably going to be new policies and are going to need to be created in so many different workplaces as more people, want to try this, personally.
This episode is brought to you by Audible. Enjoy 30 days free of Audible Premium Plus by going to ontopofpr.com/audible.
You're listening to On Top of PR with your host, Jason Mudd. Jason is a trusted advisor to some of America's most admired and fastest growing brands. He is the managing partner at Axia Public Relations, a PR agency that guides news, social, and web strategies for national companies. And now, back to the show.
All right, so back to the boardroom. What else do these folks need to know before they start engaging a content creator?
Yeah, I think also, there was an Adobe survey from a few years ago that said the average content creator is age 40, which I think would probably surprise a lot of people.
That surprises
right?
me. Yeah.
Yes, and so I think understand that their creators are all types. There are and all types of interests, and some of them are totally anonymous. They may be just an off-screen narrator. Some are full, front of the camera celebrity types and comedian types. But there's also people making very in-depth, informative content about various niches and hobbies. And those people can get very passionate followings because they're delivering a need that many people find was unmet. Sorry. So yeah. I think that's really broadening your idea of what an influencer can be, right? I think you could probably remember in the early days of social media how it was often just dismissed as people taking photos of their meals, right? Mm-hmm. And how that was really an oversimplification of what was happening. And it would be this. There would definitely, in the same way, there would be danger in thinking of influencers as just beautiful people traveling the world and being in exotic locations, doing cool things and taking photos and videos while they're doing it.
Yeah, I know somebody in my own local community that does a lot of restaurant stuff. Yeah. And
regional creators. That's another subset of this. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't tell when her posts are paid or unpaid because she doesn't mark them.
Yeah.
Right? And I get it. Like if you're not getting paid today, you start to create some kind of content.
Sure.
And I think in fairness, like she should be disclosing, when things are paid and when things are authentic and that kind of thing. So,
when a meal was provided for free and
Yeah, exactly. So, and I appreciate you saying that when the meal is provided for free. And so what I advise clients and companies all the time is if there was any consideration provided, right? It's a percentage of purchases through a affiliate link, or there was a free hotel or free airfare or free travel, free meal, free whatever, or cash traded hands. If there's any benefit at all that is exchanged or consideration exchanged, it should just be disclosed. Now you don't need to say, "Hey, I received 10% of any." Sure. Sales that transpire, but saying I receive a percentage of sales that transpire, or I can benefit from this, or they're sponsoring me or paying me to say this, or there's many ways you can say it. And as I said earlier, it doesn't have to be, in my opinion, boring and robotic. Is if it's naturally part of the conversation, not deceived or mumbled or underemphasized.
Yeah, could just be starting a video saying, "Hey, they paid me to do this," or or they just sent me this in the mail. I'm so excited to get it. Just putting it out there and making it easy to grasp. And the disclosure itself can really to meet the requirements. It could just be starting off the caption with ad. It doesn't have to be this thing that's going to weigh down a caption with all sorts of legalese, and text. Yeah.
All right, Bill. So, you wrote a book. Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Thank you.
Feels like a bucket list for everybody. I've never written a textbook.
Quite an undertaking. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I've never written a textbook. I've written, I think, 7, short books on public relations, all of which are available on Amazon, of course. But I've been mentioned and quoted a couple of times in textbooks. I've been asked if, an article I published could be in a textbook or something like that. And, so I think that's happened 2, maybe 3 times. Not a big deal. But what's really fun is one time I was taking a course, just a course, getting a certification, and unrelated to PR. And a guy in there was like, "Hey, I'm a student at the university, whatever." And I was reading my assignment, and you were quoted in this, textbook here or whatever. And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." So he texted me a photo of it, and then I thought that was even cooler, to see that. And my son is currently studying communication at the University of North Florida, and so he's not far enough along yet, but I think they've got me quoted in a textbook there. So I'm looking forward to see if he
That's really
actually
cool.
does his schoolwork and reads it, right? And then 2, if he's willing to say something to me, or I think a lot of times he kind of rolls his eyes at my stuff or whatever. So
maybe this will really get him to take note of Dad, right? When he sees that name in his textbook.
Well, I was recently interviewed, I'll just mention on CNN,
Yeah.
and my son texted me and said it was weird to see you on TV. And I was like, well, that's weird because like his whole life I've done like, little TV segments, but
Yeah.
I guess he just was too young or not paying attention, or finally reached the age where,
he's
my kids
aware.
are all adults and they now say things to me, Bill, like, oh gosh, you were always right about whatever, or I should have listened to you. And, when you first told them the advice, they didn't care what you had to say.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Bill, you wrote a textbook. Any advice on writing a book? Any habits or techniques you used?
It's really hard, and for me, it really it made some of my struggles with focus like glaringly obvious.
Yep.
I think I was able to spread it out over time, over several months. I had editors, contacts at the publisher who were very helpful in kind of working it along, establishing deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the things, if you can kind of have somebody there, creating deadlines, creating expectations, initiating, Zooms with you every few months just to check in.
Yeah.
I think that was the big part, and also, to just, books come in all types. Right. And, I was able to, I understood that, yes, I have some perspective on this, but also there's so much, my role can also be compiling the available information out there and tapping into creators' input. I end each chapter with a Q&A with a content creator, and some who have, have big six-figure followings and who are kind enough to fill out a Q&A. So I think that's also the thing, too. Even if you don't let not maybe having a strong personal perspective or story interfere. The people who are just good at cataloging information and pulling together different perspectives and organizing it in a way that makes sense. There's books that need that as well. So just give yourself plenty of time to work on it. Do whatever you can to try to eliminate distractions. I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro method, where you set a timer for 25 minutes and focus on nothing but one task, and then take a small break and then come back into it. Mm-hmm. That's been invaluable in doing this. But yes, it also really helps to have other people keep you on track and check in. When you have that Zoom session call in a few weeks, you're going to want to have something to talk about. You're going to want to have some good news to report, and that you've accomplished this, and this before that.
Did you have a routine? Did you start each morning writing a little bit? Did you focus Saturdays on writing? Like what was your rhythm?
Yeah, really, I found that I would try to really capitalize on those days when I was not teaching, when I didn't have to be in the classroom. I found that this was not something I could do just when I had, an hour-long gap here and there. It was something that, was needed like a weekend, or needed a day where there were no other meetings scheduled and I didn't have to teach. So for me, that's what worked. To set aside a good chunk of time to really think about it. Yeah. And also Google Docs. I'm a big fan of having a doc that you could easily update with ideas. And I created an outline in there that made it much easier to write when it was time to really sit down at my keyboard and stare at a blank screen.
Yeah, for sure. You're making me remember when I was in college. It took me to like my late junior year to figure out, man, wouldn't it be cool if I just had classes on Tuesdays and Thursdays only? Instead of trying to go to classes 5 days a week or something. Split it up, have class days, have study days, have work days, etc. Because I had to pay my way through school or work my way through school. So I was a lot more attractive to an employer if I could be there all day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Need Tuesday, Thursdays off, kind of thing. So I think if you can kind of re-engineer your schedule, if you have that privilege and capability, that's always smart.
Yeah, for sure.
The other advice I've always heard about writing a book, and I share this because our audience, a lot of people are interested in writing books, is, figure out what's the 10 things you want to discuss, cover, address in your book. Make each of those be a chapter. And then once you figure out your 10 chapters, then ask yourself, kind of what are the 10 frequently asked questions about that topic, or the 10 things you want to answer about that topic. Then you've got kind of your outline built. That's very rough, obviously, but it gets you going. And then if you have an editor or an assistant or whatever, they could just take that 100 questions and answers that you have and turn that into a manuscript or a draft or something like that for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it makes it that less intimidating when you get started, right? Do you have this loose, outline, guide, concept of what you're about to do? Yeah.
Yeah, the hardest thing about going to the gym is, putting your shoes on and getting out the front door, right?
Sure.
So kind of the same thing here.
Yep.
Yeah. Bill, any closing thoughts or recommendations to our audience?
No, I mean, there's, I think just keep learning about this, right? And, I'm going to try my best to keep educating, the future interns and junior employees who are coming into your office. But I really think this is something that we really can't ignore. Talk about that this says the rise of TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. The content creators on these platforms are changing how people get the news, how people make decisions about what products to purchase, how people are entertained. And there's just big things happening. Within the last year, we saw YouTube become the dominant streaming platform on connected televisions. I don't think most people would have guessed that, right? Yeah. That more people are watching YouTube on television than are watching Netflix or Apple Plus or HBO Max. Max now, sorry. So I think that right there reflects how much people are seeing creators as a way to watching creator content as a way to unwind at the end of the day. So yeah, there's just this is going to require lots of vigilance, and I'm just excited to be kind of playing a small part in starting to standardize some of the education around this topic. Because I just think I think there's just so much creativity and energy around it. So that's what really draws me to it.
Yeah. So, Bill, real quick, if you or if our audience wants to connect with you, is LinkedIn the best way to find you, or do you prefer they drop you an email?
No, LinkedIn would be fantastic. I'm easily reachable on there, engage quickly, and am welcoming all sorts of perspectives, especially from people in the industry doing this work right now and from content creators. Please let me know the things that you think are must-haves in a textbook and in a college course around this area.
Love it. Okay. All right, Bill, thank you so much for being here. I'm glad we were able to do this. Congratulations on having the book done. And I'm really looking forward to letting this episode air and getting feedback from our audience about it as well. And we'll collaborate on how we can share it and get the word out so that we can help people stay on top of PR.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. And thank you for doing this podcast, because it's been a really helpful part of my own professional development and staying on top of what's happening in the industry. So thanks.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Thank you very much, Bill. All right, so with that's another episode of On Top of PR. I hope you enjoyed it today. Thank you for tuning in. If you would, just take a moment to either leave us a review on your preferred platform or take a moment to share this with a colleague or friend who you think would benefit from Bill's expertise. And if you do connect with Bill on LinkedIn, be sure to send him a custom invite. Let him know you heard about him or saw him on Top of PR. And, he's a really good guy, and I'm sure he will be happy to hear from you. With that, I hope something great happens to you today. And if there's ever anything we can do for you, please let us know. Be well.
This has been On Top of PR with Jason Mudd, presented by ReviewMaxer. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and check out past shows at ontopofpr.com.